Good morning, readers, or at least it is for me. Good day wherever you are and whatever time it is. And welcome back to my channel, Books, Ink, and Paper. I'm so excited today because I've had these books from my library for a bit. I've wanted to film this video for a bit, and I just haven't been able to get to it. It's a little more complex than some of the other videos that I typically do. But what I wanted to share with you today are 5 possibilities for me to rank in order of which ones I will read first. There's no timeline for this, and maybe some of them will turn out to be books that I won't read at all. But here's how this happened. I was listening to the Currently Reading podcast, which I have talked about before. I know some of you might be like, oh, yes, here we go. Meredith Monday Schwartz and Katie Cobb are the hosts of this, and this is the non-paywall one that I'm talking about today. I recently, in July, listened to season 7, episode 49, called The Listener Press. And what they often do is they have listeners like us call a number and we leave a message and recommend a book. I have not done this yet, but I love when this happens. And then, of course, we get to hear their recommendations. So in this particular episode, they share each one of those recordings from each one of the people that submitted a listener press. Now, there were 20 of them. Luckily, when I listened to this, I was on a long drive, so I was able to listen to the entire thing. And while I was driving, I was thinking which ones are really exciting to me, and that was easy. I had 5 almost right away. Like they were pretty close to the top of the list. What I didn't know, though, was whether or not I was going to like them all. And I was approaching a no-buy challenge, and I didn't want to buy a whole bunch of books that I really didn't know if I would like. I did buy one of them, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but the other 4 I got from, 3 from my library and 1 from Everand on, I think, ebook, but I'm not sure. I'll clear that up in a minute. However, what I'm going to do today in this video is I'm going to try a chapter, or maybe 2 or 3, depending on how short the chapters are. And then I'm going to report back to you about how I felt about it and which one is going to make the top of my list, and then rank them as well in order of which ones are most exciting to me. And maybe there will be one that I decide it's not for me, and you'll find out why that might happen in a minute. So let's take a look at these 5 books. Number 1 that I learned about first is, sorry about that glare, 0 Stars Do Not Recommend by M.J. Wasmer. Never heard of this author, never heard of this book. This one has a 3.66 rating on Goodreads, and it was recommended by Kristen at Reading with Kristen, which is her channel, her platform. So this one is very interesting. The synopsis says that it's sort of a combination of White Lotus and Kevin Wilson. So it is funny, it is speculative, it is dystopian, because Dan and his girlfriend, Mara, I think, go to this island to have an escape and a lovely vacation, and the sun explodes. And some people create a coup, and they start to commandeer everything that is available. And so people are panicking. Obviously, they can't get off the island. It's dark. There's darkness everywhere. I can't imagine. And suddenly Dan finds a plane that can carry 6 passengers. Of course, he's probably going to choose, hopefully he's going to choose Mara, right? But probably who else is he going to choose? And are they going to be able to get out? I don't know, but this one is probably the one that if I were to guess, I would say it would be top of or closest to top of the list. So we shall see. I'm going to read a chapter in a minute or 2, and I'm going to get back to you about all of these. The next one is Northwoods by Daniel Mason. This is the one I did buy. You may remember this gorgeous, gorgeous cover. This one is recommended by Samantha. It has a 4.11 rating of stars, and this is set in New England. The original couple of this house are some Puritans that have escaped and are hiding out in this cabin that they found, or maybe they built, I'm not sure. And then this same house goes through different people that inhabit it for centuries. So I had to write these down, an English soldier, twin spinsters, a crime reporter, an artist. Also, some animals end up in the house, a panther. It talks about a beetle. This makes sense to me now because I don't think I ever fully read the synopsis and realized that on that other version of this, this other cover, it is a panther, I think, on the cover. The dark and raucous past of all of these people's lives are still in this house somehow. So it says all of these things, extraordinary, exhilarating, captivating, all of that. But also, my sense is that it is beautifully written history of a house that becomes a character. So can't say this won't be on my list. I'm pretty sure it will, but we shall see. I hope so because I purchased it, right? The next one is Farthing by Joe Walton. This is book one in a series, and the series is called Small Change. I had never heard of this book. It was recommended by Melinda, and it has a 3.81 rating. This one, set in 1949, but it's not our history of 1949. This is about some elite families who are living in London, I think, and one of them has a child named Lucy. Also present at this time is Churchill has been overthrown and Hitler is the leader of everything in England. However, Lucy is a bit of a rogue. She has married a Jew and her family is devastated. However, they invite her to a retreat, and she's a little surprised by that, obviously, since they're not big fans of her husband, David. They go to this retreat, and someone is murdered there, not one of them. But of course, who do you think is the suspect? David. And so a Scotland Yard detective comes to search this house and to interview all of these people to see if they can find out what happened. Melinda said this was one of her favorite books, and she thought it was absolutely compulsive and compelling. It sounds really good to me. And she won an award, John W. Campbell Award, for Best New Writer on a publication of a novel, The King's Peace. So this is not her first, and I am sure that there's more in that series. So sounds super to me. The next one was recommended by Kelsey, and this is Finnegan of the Rock by Melina Marchetta. Now, you're going to be surprised when I say to you this, and maybe you've kind of gotten the hint. This is a fantasy. It is also young adult. And you know I don't read a whole lot of those. But the synopsis of this and the way that the person who pressed this into our hands, Kelsey, described it, I was really, really intrigued by this one. So this has a 3.90 rating on Goodreads, and this is about Finnegan and his companion, his loyal guardian. They return back from a 10-year hiatus from this particular place. The royal family was murdered while he was gone, so that made a lot of changes happen. And so he returns with his guardian. And while they are gone, the country is overtaken and there's been a siege. And so he's been gone for 10 years. He's not been living there. And his friend Evangeline reaches out to him and asks him to come back to try to, I think, support the recovery of their place, their land, their possessions. When he comes back, he discovers that Evangeline may have some ulterior motives and some sticky stuff going on. I do think that Kelsey recommended this more deeply and gave me more about it, but I don't necessarily want to have a lot of spoilers either. So, it was a hard choice for me to decide if I wanted to read the whole synopsis or not. Somebody left something inside of here. But I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to give it a go. And that I think is a step forward for me. So there you go. All right. And the last one is Withered Hill by David Barnett. This is recommended by Claire. It has 4.10 ratings. And this one is a dystopian, I would say, speculative, not necessarily fantasy, but maybe. And it's kind of a it's very unique. So let's just say that this is two timelines, same character. One timeline is called the inside, one timeline is called the outside. Okay, so the inside, Sophie finds herself in this little village called Withered Hill, and she recognizes pretty straight on that these people are very pagan and very ritualistic. And I don't want to know a whole lot about this book because it sounds so mysterious, and I want it to kind of stay that way. But she ends up discovering that her memories are not available to her. She's really uncertain and maybe feels like she's kind of, been a spell has been put on her or something. I don't know about that, but I just remember Claire saying that she was fuzzy, very, very fuzzy. The next timeline is London, and she is a drunkard and she dates a lot of guys and she goes from job to job and doesn't really love any of the work that she does at all. And she ends up with a message that says, "Go to Withered Hill." That's all I want to know. Now, you know why it was intriguing for me, right? So I can't wait to listen to this one. It's billed as gothic fantasy horror, so a little bit of fantasy, but definitely has a gothic feel. So now I'm going to read a chapter of each one, and then I will tell you how I felt about each one. All right, let's see how this ended up going. I started, as you could see, by reading, I think, just the first chapter of Zero Stars Do Not Recommend. It starts with a bang. It begins with the sun exploding and with everything going dark. So there's not a lot of setup for this couple yet, but there is a sense of urgency and a sense of humor for sure. There is a lot of funny banter back and forth, and his thoughts of what's happening are definitely fun, and I really enjoyed it. It is not his voice, but it is definitely a fast pace so far too. Yeah, I liked this one. I enjoyed this one. I was pretty sure I would enjoy that one, and I definitely did. Okay, then I read a chapter, just one chapter of this one, Northwoods, and I enjoyed it. It's very, so here's what I did. I looked ahead a little bit to see if this was going to be sort of different language based on different characters that were in the house, and it is. So yeah, I think that this is one that I'm still very, very interested in. This just sets up the first couple, the Puritans, and how their journey to this house begins. And yeah, I liked this one too. I also liked Farthing. I definitely uh, felt like I was getting into a very historically driven novel with a setup for what is going to happen. So this begins in the past a little bit where this family is upset about the fact that this couple is going to get married. And so they're, having a conversation. The mother seems more upset. This is first person, at least in the beginning of this novel. And she says it all started when David came in front from the lawn, absolutely furious. And they were there for a political squeeze, she says. So, so this is really about the difficulties that they're having as a married couple, or maybe they were just engaged at this point, and how the situation is going, how her family is taking it, how her dad's conversation with her went, those kinds of things. And then I'm sure the second chapter, it looks as though the second chapter goes in with a bang toward what's going to happen next. And I liked it. I really, really liked it. I haven't read historical fiction by this author at all. I've read nothing by any of these authors, so that's really interesting. I read two chapters of Finnegan of the Rock because the first one was really just a very quick entrance into this story's past. So this begins with a prologue where you learn about Finnegan, and you learn about Lumetier, and you learn about his friends. And then I decided I needed to go to the second one. I liked the prologue a lot, but I decided I needed to go to the second one and just kind of see where this was going to go. And this is when he comes back, I believe. So what's interesting is I enjoyed reading it. I was surprised by how much I was kind of noticing past reads that are similar to this that I really enjoyed. I was thinking about, the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings trilogies, or Lord of the Rings canon. And then I was also thinking about Game of Thrones a little bit. And I was just remembering, I guess, the days in which reading fantasy of this sort was a little bit more appealing to me. So I kind of felt like I was getting settled into a really good story. My only hesitation on this one is that it is, I mean, to put it first anyway, it is 399 pages long, so it's a lot longer than these are, I would say. And so that might be the only thing that makes me keep it on the list, perhaps, but also maybe not get to it fast. And then I listened to a chapter of Withered Hill on Everand, and I gotta say that one I was drawn in pretty much by Sophie and pretty much by her situation, and it begins with the outside. So that was like more contemporary. It sets up who she is, just as the synopsis says. She's drunk. She doesn't necessarily remember who she's been with. Her friends are worried about her. She's kind of living a dangerous life. And then at the end of the first chapter, she finds a note from this man that was in her bed, and it says to call these people for a new job. And she does, and someone picks up the phone and they begin to talk. And that's where that first chapter ends. And so it definitely made me want to get to the next chapter more, I would say, than these three that happened. This was just kind of like, this is the story and it's going to continue. And so, there you go. But Withered Hill, and I would say this one, both made me want to keep going because I wanted to find out what was going to happen to these people. So you're probably realizing now that probably the first two are going to be the battle for the first one is going to be between Zero Stars and Withered Hill. Now, let me just say for this situation, is hard. This is hard. Like, I want to read them all. To be honest, I'm really happy about that and surprised by that. So let's go with the fifth to the first. Let's start there. So I think the last one on my list will be Finnegan of the Rock, but I do think that I will get to it at some point. I would like to come back to this and get it back out of the library at some point in the future and really try to understand, is this going to work for me? It may be next year before I do this, but I'm going to put it on my list of things that I really do want to read. So I'm happy about that. I really, really am. Surprisingly, I think number four is Northwoods. Not because I didn't like it, but because I think these first few chapters are going to be a little bit harder on my brain to read because they're set in that first, sort of that different way of using language and, setting up that first beginning of that house, I think is going to take a bit. But yeah, I think this one would be number four, but definitely want to read it. Number three, I think, is Farthing. I really like this, though. Joe Walton. I want to find out what happens in this dystopian fantasy about what would be different if Hitler was in charge of England and probably other countries eventually too, but definitely England. So this is number three. Are you surprised? Number two is Zero Stars Do Not Recommend by M.J. Wasmer. I really think this would be a quick read, funny, easy. You notice that's part of my choice here is which ones are the easier ones, but this one definitely is entertaining, and I don't think it would take me terribly long to read it. This one is 371 pages with a little book club or question the author kind of situation. So number two. So now you know. Number one is Withered Hill by David Barnett. And it's narrated by Ziggy Sobers, which is a really funny name for me to say out loud to you, but I love it. This one came out this year, actually, in February, and I didn't realize that until just now. So the rest of these, I think, are a little bit older. This one is 2024. I didn't even look at what all the years were for these, but this one is the top one on the list. And so I'm listening to it on Everand. I don't have any, like hurry to get to it, but I also want to get back to it and find out what happens next when Sophie goes to talk to this person about a potential job. So yes, please, Withered Hill. That's the order in which I want to get to these. So that is Withered Hill by David Barnett, Zero Stars Do Not Recommend by M.J. Wasmer, Farthing by Joe Walton will go next, even though I'll probably return that one for now. Daniel Mason's Northwoods, which I have never gotten to, and I do think I will read it for sure. And then the last one on the list is Finnegan of the Rock, but I'm not saying I'm not going to read it. I really think I will read it, and in fact, I may actually recommend it to some friends of mine that really love this kind of story. I mean, I would recommend it to any of you who love kind of fantasy and that era of kings and castles and rulers and despots. There you go. Maybe that's the title of this video. No, I'm kidding. All right, readers, thank you so much for watching today. This is always a lot of fun for me to do, and it gives me a good sense of what is important to me and what will work for me the best. So we shall see. We'll find out if Withered Hill and then eventually Zero Stars end up being reads that I really enjoy. Let me know what you're pondering. If you have listened to or decide to listen to the currently reading podcast that was published when I told you, Season 7, Episode 49, July 14th. If you decide to listen to that and you have other books that you find out about through that podcast, do let me know. And support Currently Reading in any way you can. They're great humans and they really do create so many great opportunities for me to read books and learn about authors that I never would have if I hadn't been listening to their shows. You can join their Patreon group if you choose to do that. It's only $5 a month, and I have gotten a whole lot out of it and really enjoy those extra videos as well. Thanks again for watching, readers, and happy reading. Bye.